And let's look at what cycle time, what we're talking about when we talk about cycle time. Another term that probably a lot of people use and maybe don't use it always in a correct way. We think about the work that we have in process. So in an inventory standpoint, it's easy to think about work in process inventory wise. Sometimes when we think about tasks or jobs, we just think about how many jobs have we started that are in process that aren't complete. So I have this terminology, work in process, or a WIP, the amount of stuff that's in the system. And so again, stuff can be inventory, like physical parts. It can be just jobs that are started. It might be customers, the number of people that we're working on. We have an exit rate, which sometimes we might refer to as throughput, and that's the output of process we can achieve over a period of time. So basically, how fast are we finishing projects or finishing products? And the cycle time is the time from when a product is introduced, so the time from when you start a product or a project or a customer, that it takes it to run through the entire system and then sort of come out the other end as being completed. And hopefully what you can see just by thinking of this graphic is that the more work in process you have, the longer this pipe gets, and the longer the pipe gets, the longer it takes for something that goes in one end to come out at the other end. And there's this Little's Law. Apparently it took somebody really smart to come up with this really simple equation, or not an equation, a ratio. And it's their cycle time is a ratio of the work in process, the amount of stuff you've started, divided by your exit rate. And again, these might be projects, and they might be papers in an in basket, they might be people. And one of these concepts that has to do with lean, which what we're trying to do is reduce the cycle time, and that we can see if we just reduce the amount of WIP, we cut down on the number of things that we've started, that we're working on, then our cycle time will go down, even without increasing the exit rate, just by decreasing the amount of stuff that we have. So we all probably know people who start a job and finish a job before they start another job, and things go fast for them. And then if you're like me, you got the honey-do list at home that's got, a whole lot of projects listed on the refrigerator. If you try to start all of them, then what happens is you always make a little bit of progress, but nothing ever gets finished. So one of these concepts that has to do with reducing inventory or reducing WIP or Kanbans or just in time is this idea that if I wait to start something until I'm ready to finish it, then my cycle time will decrease. And when we think about inventory or about time, there's an analogy, they call it rocks in the river. And when you think about the level of water in a river, when the level of water is high, so when our inventory is high, or when the amount of time I give myself to complete something is high, then whenever I have problems, I don't really notice those. Inventory is like insurance. And part of the key here is that by reducing the inventory, or by reducing the amount of time you give yourself to complete a project, you'll start to see where your biggest problems are. And that is kind of a different way of thinking, because it basically says I'm going to get stuck on my problems. And the key here is that by getting stuck on your problems, they become apparent, and that you do things to fix those problems. And when you do things to fix those problems, you'll be able to operate at a lower water level, at a lower inventory level, or at a lower lead time level. It really is one of the fundamental principles of lean, and I think it's one that a lot of people miss. You don't cut your inventory just to cut your inventory. You cut your inventory so that problems become more apparent. It exposes those problems. And again, a lot of people don't like problems to be exposed because they're painful, but the long-term result is, because they're painful, you'll do things to correct them. Sometimes I call this back of the book engineering. I've worked with a lot of people who basically say, yeah, we're doing lean, or we're doing just in time, we're cutting our inventory, or we're cutting our lead time, and they're not really doing anything to tackle the problems that are here. And of course what they're seeing is that their business is going worse. They're having more late deliveries, or they're having more problems, and they're kind of missing the point there. The point is not to cut your inventory to have less inventory. The point is to cut your inventory so that you force yourself to fix problems. And when you fix the problems, then you can drop your inventory and you can sort of cruise along safely. We have this another concept in Lean, another tool or technique is setup reduction. And so in a manufacturing environment, we think about setup time is the elapsed time from when you produce one good part until you begin producing another good part when you're switching over from one item to another. So it's that machine downtime. It includes things like prep time, setup of the machine, any kind of adjustments of the machine, any kind of trial runs. And if you think about Lean and you think about productivity, setup time, which is downtime, just eats away at your productivity and your efficiency. In a construction environment, you think about it's the systematic process to reduce the amount of time and effort required to move from one task to another. So I think we see a lot of setup that maybe isn't necessarily termed setup, but we see a lot of setup in the construction industry. 5S, I mentioned earlier, is a workplace organization system. It has this 5S nomenclature, basically 5 steps in the process: to sort, to set in order, to shine. There is some housekeeping associated with it. To standardize and sustain. I think 5S is another one of those that there's really a lot of misconception about what it is. I talk to a lot of folks in my consulting business, and I say, are you interested in 5S, or have you tried to implement 5S? And they say, yeah, we got a bunch of cleaning rags and mops and brooms, and we're doing 5S. What they're talking about is they're doing one step in 5S, shine. I think it's kind of maybe one of the minimal steps in it. You're missing the big picture of what a 5S system is if you think all it is a housekeeping operation. Here's a maintenance room in a manufacturing plant. Some of you probably have maintenance areas that look a lot like this. Hard to find anything. Maybe the 1 or 2 guys that work back there know where to find. Maybe they know where to find items, but one of the problems is they're not there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So when you send someone else in there to find a 3/8 compression fitting, they spend half a day digging around, and they come back and they say, we can't find a 3/8 compression fitting. That's after 5S. Again, this is just a workplace organization system that tries to get your work area organized so that you can find what it is you're looking for, which makes you more productive in the end. These are common little shadow boards so that you know where to find different tools. You see it in toolboxes, just things like labeling. We'll talk more in detail about what 5S really is and how to implement a 5S system. These Kanbans or pull system, a Kanban is just a visual signal. It's a signal to replenish an item. The key here is that consumption triggers replenishment. So when I use something up, that's going to be my signal that I need to replace it. It's a very simple inventory control system that's a lot of times I think it's used by people and they don't really realize that they're actually using a Kanban. Here's a Kanban signal. This is in a manufacturing plant. This is an incoming return material authorization area. Just 2 great big yellow squares. And what the people who work in the RMA area say is, bring me 2 loads of material that I need to process for receiving, and don't bring me any more material. So it doesn't make me work any faster if you pile up pallets all around me. All it's really going to do is make me work slower because I'm tripping over it and I can't get to what I need to get to. Bring me 2 pallets. I'll work on those 2 pallets. When I'm finished with one of the pallets, I'll take all these boxes off. I'll put the pallet away, and you'll see a great big empty yellow square on the floor, and that'll be the signal to you that I'm ready for you to bring me another return material authorization pallet. I'm ready to process sort of the next job. And here's a very old Kanban system. The milkman used a Kanban system. Remember, replenishment triggers consumption triggers replenishment. So this was a real simple system. You had a certain number of jars of milk in your house. When you used up a few of them, you put empties on the doorstep. The milkman drove by. If he didn't see any empties on the doorstep, he didn't replenish anything. If he saw 4 empties on the doorstep, that was his signal to replenish it with 4 fulls. The new system of that today, if you go to the grocery store, this is what You know, you have gravity flow racks, and this is what the refrigerated section of a grocery store looks like. Customers sort of shop on this side. The stock and people refill from this side. You look in a given tray. Consumption, which means customers have taken some of this out. Triggers replenishment. If you see a tray getting empty, you know to fill up the tray. If you see a tray that's full, you know that you don't need to fill any more up. It is a very simple, very visual system that I don't need to run reports or see computer printouts to know what to do here. I mentioned this earlier, a spaghetti diagram. Spaghetti diagram just looks like this CAD layout, and it shows all the steps that people have to take. I have done some of these with yarn and push pins on a cork board with a CAD layout, and some of them look so ridiculous you almost think that they're not real, that someone was just being silly. You just look at all the steps that you make people walk sometimes to complete a task is almost criminal. So that's an introduction to Lean, a couple of the tools and techniques, sort of a summary of them. We'll have some detailed presentations, and I'll ask you to use some of those tools and techniques in your environment. I hope that gives you a good idea of what we're going to be talking about in the next week or two.